We can yap more about it when I inevitably end up on Spectate. But yeah, I have like a whole past life of being in the kitchen world, and I both miss and don't miss it. While I do this, let me rattle off more about my life as a cook. I got into cooking just as like it was who was able to hire me. My very first job, I was working at like a Saturday farmers market. It was like a street market, and I was just like set up and tear down. I worked that job throughout high school because I only had to work 1 day a week on Saturdays, and it was brutal. It was a lot of physical labor. What am I doing? I don't even know this kit. I had to be up at 4 in the morning to get to work on time, and then I didn't get home until like 4, 5, 6 p.m. sometimes. So once I graduated high school, like I just stayed with that job because it was so convenient to only have to work 1 day a week. And the paychecks were fat. So I stayed with that job. But then when I was out of high school, I was like, okay, like I need something a little bit more regular. So I kind of just like sent out applications to everywhere. And Cheesecake Factory was the first one that hired me. And I kind of, at first I thought, oh dude, my life just got way better because I worked in the bakery. Basically my entire job was just to be up front, tell people about the cakes, sell them on the cakes, and then prep the plate, you know, like things like if they got like the s'mores cake, like burn the marshmallow on the top and add the lime on the key lime and stuff like that. So at first I was kind of like, wow, what an upgrade to life in general. Like I went from working so much physical labor at really early mornings to now I'm playing Papa's Cakeria on a regular basis for money. This is crazy. I was like, my life is fantastic. And then I got a couple, you know, a taste of my first couple like rushes, like people coming in and ordering a lot of things, and one order coming in with another order, coming in with another order, and this one's a to-go order, and you messed up this order and you got to figure this out. And I was kind of like, oh my God. I was like, this is crazy. I need to, I don't know how anybody does this. And when I moved to Seattle, then me and my roommate, we applied for some cooking jobs, and they were like, which one of you has worked at Cheesecake Factory? I was like, I've worked at Cheesecake Factory. And they were like, is it a package deal? Do we have to hire you and your roommate, or would you let us just hire you? And I was like, nah, you got to get both of us. And they were like, all right. And so they hired both of us. And so that was like my first real cooking job. And I was like, oh, okay, now we're like actually making food. This isn't just cakes. This is legitimate. This is real stuff here. I'll continue on Chris's cooking life trilogy after this. We've made it past the Cheesecake Factory mark. What do you mean it's not fresh? Yeah, the Cheesecake Factory cheesecakes they're all in a giant walk-in freezer. Also, we have a spot open if anybody wants to join in. Password is 6464 for anyone who wants to jump in. Papa's Pizzeria. Yeah, Papa's Freezeria was my job. I was making cakes, dude. I was like, oh my God, my life is great. All this makes me want to try and draw. You should. There's a couple details to my story I'm probably never going to tell anybody. But we're about to get into, as I'm on Spectate, we're about to get into Chris's life in Seattle. Let me add also really quick, only because it's going to matter for the backstory. I graduated top of my class. Like I was a speaker at my graduation, and my biggest flex is that I was top 4% in the US for my year on the math portion of the SAT. Like I was up there. I was like amongst my peers voted most likely to succeed. I went to a small high school, so it's not that huge of a flex. I had a graduating class of like about 40, but I really cared about like doing well in school, right? So I graduate, I work at Cheesecake Factory for a little while. I decide to move to Seattle with my roommate because we're going to go pursue the music scene. We need jobs. We spent the first like month in Seattle like trying to believe that we didn't need jobs. We were like, yeah, we're going to do it with our music. We're going to start a podcast. We're going to run a Patreon. We're going to do XYZ, all this. And then that didn't work. Then we just spent a month basically doing nothing productive with ourselves. And we were like, okay, well, like, never mind. So again, we were sending out applications to wherever, and there was a restaurant nearby. Our landlord actually was like, if you guys need jobs, I have a friend who owns a kitchen and they are looking for cooks. You guys should go apply there. And so we were like, sure. So we went over there. I got the job, and they were like, is it definitely a two-person, or can we just hire you? And I was like, you also got to hire my roommate. So they're like, okay, they hired both of us. And this was really like a pub more than anything. It was really just like a bar that also had food. And so I was making primarily like burgers and like some salads and like a chicken wrap we did. Is where I met my first like real chef, and his name was Rick. And Rick was really cool. I was kind of a picky eater when I first got to Seattle. I was like, I don't really like avocado. I don't really like mustard. I don't like pickles. I met my chef Rick, and he had this philosophy. He was like, you need to eat one of everything on the menu. Our rule here is that you can have a meal every day as long as you make it for yourself. And I was like, okay. And he's like, for your first couple of weeks, I'm going to have you go down the menu and you're going to make yourself one of everything on the menu. He's like, this is important because if you're going to be the one making the food, you need to know what it's like when it's done right. You need to know like what overripe avocado does and how that ruins the food that you're making in XYZ. Again, we're making pub food. Like, we're not making that much important food, but I appreciated that he had this mentality of like, if you're going to do it, you're going to do it right. I was trying one of everything and I was kind of like, yeah, but I don't like avocado. Yeah, but I don't like mustard. Yeah, but I don't like pickle. And he was like, I don't care. You're going to make this for yourself for food or you're not going to get to eat on shift today. And I was like, okay, I'm going to eat pickles and mustard and avocado, I guess. And now I really like mustard and avocados. I'm still iffy on pickles, but what it really was, what that taught me, there's no ingredients that you don't like. There's no individual ingredients that you don't like. You just need to figure out what meal they work well in. And I, to this day, really think that's true, where it's like, I've always said, like, I hate pineapple. Pineapple is like easily one of my least favorite foods, but given his mentality, I'm like, yeah, I can imagine a few things that like a sweet yet citrusy added ingredient. I understand how that could amplify a dish and why that's like important for me to know what that tastes like. So he really taught me a lot. He was a fantastic first chef, but I was very like nervous because I was like, I have to do well. This is my life. I'm learning how to be an adult. I need to figure this out. He was kind of a character. He got into cooking because he was like, I had 2 daughters and they were getting of an age where they graduated. And this is a real quote that he told me. He said, I have 2 daughters and they just graduated. He said, I realized that I kept telling my daughters, he said they need to do what they love and they need to get rid of what they hate. And he's like, I realized that I kept telling my daughters that, but I needed to follow it myself. So I got rid of everything that I hated, starting with my wife. And I was like, Jesus. And he's like, and also the job that I was working in, I realized I wanted to be in food. So I quit my job and I went into culinary school. And now I'm a chef here because I really wanted to be a chef. I was like, oh my God, bro. Yeah, and it was true. It was true too. He had a bunch of other stories to go with. He was wild. He was a real character. Where did we leave off on this story? Okay, so I moved to Seattle, got my roommate a job. My chef had introduced me to the concept of there's no ingredients that you don't like. So I was learning a lot from him. Meanwhile, having just moved to Seattle, I was 18. I moved out like right after I graduated, didn't go to college. Despite the scholarships that I had pretty much in hand, trying to figure out how to be an adult, how do I live, how do I make sure my rent is paid, getting everything wrong that you're supposed to get wrong when you're 18 and have no idea how to live on your own. While I was at that point, people were asking me like, how's Seattle going? Like, what are you doing? And I was like, oh, I'm a cook. I'm a line cook. And I think it might have just been like the disappointment that I was projecting onto other people, but I felt like people who were excited to hear what we were doing in Seattle, hearing that I went from speaking at my graduation, now hearing me like being a line cook, flipping burgers kind of a thing. I was kind of like, ugh, I need to get out of this. I was like, I need to figure out something, a little bit better to do with myself. I feel like I'm really not living up to any amount of potential here. I told my roommate, I was like, hey, I don't think I want to work the job anymore. I think I want to find something else. And he told my boss before I did. My boss texted me and was like, hey, is this true? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, let's have a talk about it. And I was like, okay. She's like, are you wanting to quit because of the pay? And I was like, that's part of it. And she was like, I'll show you something. So we walked over about a block away from the restaurant to another restaurant that they had. And this one was like an upscale lounge. And the kitchen was bigger. The responsibility was higher. The number of other cooks that I shared the kitchen with was way lower. All of the menu was like way more upscale. And she was like, what if you don't quit? We promote you. And I was like, really? And she was like, yeah, you'll get bigger pay over here. You'll get different hours that are a little more consistent for you. And we can work that out with Kelly, who was the sous chef over there. She's like, it's a little bit more esteemed of a menu. Would you be willing to do this? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. And so I took that job, and that was where I like really found my stride as a cook. And had it not been for COVID shutting everything down, I was ready to like let that be my job while I then did music stuff on the side, where I was like, oh, I'm figuring it out. This is an esteemed kitchen. I like what's happening here. My roommate just stayed over at the other kitchen. So now it became really cool when me and my roommate would have work at the same time. We would walk over to each other's restaurants when we needed things or when we were off shift. It was suddenly really good. I was making more upscale things. I really learned how to cook during this time. Like that was really where I was like, wait a minute, I'm a cook and I like this. This will be the last room, and we'll do it until I'm done yapping about my kitchen life once I get to the end of the story here. Apologies to whoever else is on Spectate while I continue yapping. Let's pick up where we left off on this episode of Chris the cook, and sorry to Sammy who doesn't get to play Turf War with the Wellstring V. They just promoted me. I was really finding my stride. I was making upscale food. I mean, it was like steaks now. I went from burgers to steaks is what I was suddenly cooking. And it was run by the same company that I already really liked the people, and I was sad to like be leaving them. But now I was like making way more upscale stuff. And so I felt a lot better about myself. And we were really starting to make money, and we were like making life work. We also kicked out a roommate, and so we were under a bunch of financial stress, but we were making it work. We had enough money to pay the rent the way that we needed to. So life was kind of going okay. Then COVID hit, and it all shut down very quickly. I don't know if anybody knows this. The first case of COVID in the US was in basically our backyard. It was in King County, Washington, which is where we lived. It was kind of becoming a big deal, and the news was talking about it. I was looking on my phone at the time. I was waiting for orders to come in, and orders weren't coming in. And the mayor of King County announced that all restaurants would be shutting down. Effective like the next morning, I was still on shift when this happened. So I was essentially laid off before I clocked out that day. And in that moment, I kind of had this realization. I was like, I don't know if anybody else has ever experienced what I'm experiencing right now. We were really lucky that our landlord understood and gave us our full security deposit back and just let us cut our lease with no penalty or anything like that. Within 48 hours, it was basically like, oh, life is good. Like things are okay. I'm kind of figuring it out. I'm like becoming a cook. Like this is not bad. And I'm taking my bike to work instead of the bus because it saves me a little bit of money. This COVID thing is happening. I'm moving home. It's all over. It was very abrupt. And so within 48 hours, we packed up all of our belongings into a U-Haul and we moved back home. And so for the first while, no one was really allowed to work and no one was doing anything. We were all just, kind of stuck inside. And then everything started opening up again. And the family who we moved back in with, they were like, hey, okay, time to get it going again. So I just put out applications for restaurants in the area, and I got hired by this restaurant that was like high end in my area and making like a number of things. But because it was a bigger restaurant, there were multiple chefs. So I didn't really get this like one-on-one chef experience like I had in Seattle. And I had a station. I no longer had a kitchen to myself where I was making everything on the menu. I had a section of the menu and I had a station, and I worked that. And we will get into how that completely ruined my taste for cooking on the next episode, on the next battle. So got to get the white chef coat you have to wash every day. I didn't. All my stuff, I never got up to any sort of chef's coat. All my stuff was always just black stuff that you put over whatever you were wearing, or an apron. At my job in Seattle, they didn't care. They were very laid back about a lot of things. I had an eyebrow slit, and they were like, it was one of the like first weeks that I was there. They were like, do you have an eyebrow piercing? And I was like, no. And they're like, what's this in your eyebrow? I was like, just an eyebrow slit. And they're like, if you have an eyebrow piercing, you can wear it to work. I was like, I don't have an eyebrow piercing. They're like, okay, just so you know, if you did, you could bring it to work. You could wear it. We're not going to care. And I was like, I don't have one, but thank you. I didn't know enough about the cooking world from a real professional standpoint. The most cringy thing that I did that anybody in the cooking world will understand why this is really stupid. I put on my resume that I was a chef. I've never been a chef. I just was treated like one at my other job, and I had full control over the kitchen, so they told me I was a chef. I was not ready to be a chef. So they put me at a station, and I struggled. I mean, it was a little more corporate. It was a bigger kitchen. There was more to do. I was like, I don't want any more than 3 days a week. I was like, I have a lot of other things going on. I have online schooling that I'm doing. I was like, I can be flexible, and you can give me kind of any 3 days a week that you want. Don't give me more than 3 days a week, please. And they were like, okay. And they were like, is it a package deal? Do we have to hire your roommate? And I was like, damn right, you have to hire my roommate. In reality, my roommate didn't even get an interview. I just told him to come with me to my interview and that it would work out, and it did. And I was like, you got to give my roommate a job too. And they were like, okay. So a few months in it, like, I'm doing it, and I'm really going hard. Like, my days at this point look like I usually have morning shifts, which I like. I preferred opening over closing. I didn't really like closing shifts. I'd go work these opening shifts, and then I would come home and do schooling. The person who was on the thing next to me was definitely more experienced, and very early on, he was like, Chris, he's like, I'm gonna give you this homework. He's like, here's a list of what everything, all the words in the kitchen mean. Things like fire, things like 86, and all that. Because at my other thing, I didn't really need to do a ton of communicating with other people. I had one other chef, and I knew enough to communicate with the team that we needed to communicate. He gave me this full list. He's like, I want you to go home and I want you to learn all these things. I was not going to go home and do that. I was going to go home and work on my music marketing degree that I was doing really well in, and this was a job. This was money. I didn't really care about cooking that much anymore because I had left my favorite kitchen that I wanted to be part of. So I didn't do that. I started to struggle. And then they fired my roommate because he wasn't keeping up. Then they started to give me my roommate's hours. And I went to the chef and I was like, hey, dog, no, I told you already, only 3 days a week. And he was like, well, we need you for more than that. But I stood my ground. I was like, no, dude, like, we made an agreement when I took this job, and you're going back on it now for what? This is probably the craziest part of the story. I don't know if people are actually going to believe that this part is real. At this point, and pretty much all through the time that I was living in Seattle, I really started to get into like entrepreneurship and like following Gary Vee and, you know, the business grind set influencers and all that. So I put out on one of these like businessy marketing influencer grind set hustle lifestyle type group like forums. I added there, I was like, does anybody have any advice on switching your side hustle? I want my main hustle to be music, and I'm spending a bunch of time on it, but my side hustle so far has been working in a kitchen. I don't want to work in a kitchen anymore. I want to switch it to graphic design. I don't know what to do. On this group, I'm talking to people and they're giving me advice. Some people are like, do all three. Idiot. No, I'm not doing all three. Some people are like, you know, do this, fucking whatever. Some advice here. One person from that group messages me. This is the craziest part of the story. That person messages me. He was like, what's your monthly expenses right now? And I was like, I'm really lucky. I'm living with family. They're not charging me that much for rent. I was like, after groceries and any other bills that I have to pay, like my phone bill and all that, I would say I probably have $250 a month worth of expenses right now as we're recovering from COVID. And he said, what's your Venmo? And I said, you're not serious. And he said, what's your Venmo? And I was like, this is my Venmo. And he sent me $250. This random stranger I'd never met before. He sent me $250, and he said you're gonna put in your 2 weeks notice, and that's a month for you to figure it out. In a month, I want you to have this figured out. He's like, I'm gonna pay for a month, and at the end of the month, you're gonna be a graphic designer. You're not gonna be a cook anymore. And I was like, oh my God. And I wasn't ready to immediately write my 2 weeks notice right then and there. I wasn't going to quit right then and there. But then I had the argument with my chef where he was like, you're going to come in more hours than we agreed to. And I had the $250 in the agreement with this guy. And I was like, no, I'm not, dude. And it was kind of like he has no idea moment. He never asked for it back. He followed up every now and then to like see how life was going and all this. And I asked him, I was like, are you sure? Do you want me to pay you this back anymore? His story, I don't know if I believe his story, but he was like, I owed this money. He's like, I owed more money than this to a friend who just recently got in a car crash, and I can't ever pay him back again. So, you know, I would like to do this for you. He's like, it would kind of bring me a little bit of closure. And I was like, heard, bro. And so I did that, and by the end of that month, I signed up for this online, like it's like a resource for graphic design. It has like a bunch of Photoshop templates, fonts, image files, stock, pretty much anything that you would need. And they also have a bunch of courses. And so I just started taking these courses, and I started following it. And then I started messaging all of my music friends and people who had event companies. And I was like, do you need graphic design? Do you need a flyer made? Do you need cover art and this and that? And I basically just started messaging everybody. And I was like, do you need work? Do you need graphic design? Do you need this? Do you need this? Like, hire me. Do you want to hire me for this? And eventually got a bunch of work and started saving up a bunch of money, and then made the plan with my roommate to move out to Ohio. And from that point on, I was basically like, okay, I'm just gonna keep doing this. I have this many months of money saved up from my paychecks in a kitchen and from the work that I've done. I was like, I'm gonna work my ass off, and if this money runs out, I'll go back into a kitchen. And I never did. That is pretty much the start to finish story of Chris the line cook. Peak line cook story. Yeah, that's been my life. And so yeah, every day when you wake up and you look at your bank account and you're like, all right, I've got this long to figure it out. I have to make this much money in this amount of time, or I'm going back to a kitchen, because I knew I could always get rehired in a kitchen. I knew I had the resume to get me back into a kitchen, but I knew that's not what I wanted. And so I was just like, all right, this is what I have to do. I have to figure this out. I have to get more clients. I have to figure out what freelancing means. And so yeah, now it's my full time. I make way more money doing it than I ever did in a kitchen. So appreciate you guys. Thanks for listening to me yap about my former life as a line cook. And that is all over. That was years of my life. I identified as a line cook for a while. I have one, I can find it. Every line cook has it. I have one grease burn on my arm. I have one grease burn scar somewhere on my arm. And if I really look for it, I can find it. It's right there. It's right on my arm, and it happened because we were in the middle of a rush. I had a huge grease bubble land on my arm, and it burned really bad, but I had to get these orders out, and I had Chef yapping at me, and so I just didn't worry about it, and I was like, it's going to go away, and I flicked my arm a little bit to try and get the grease off, put out the orders onto the thing, did this, did that, did that. By the time I looked back, big-ass blister, and I was like, fuck. I was like, I cannot believe that. Sat, washed it off, did whatever, blah, 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 covered it up with bandage, and now it's my only kitchen scar. Everybody's got one. So you'll get one, Ave. Anyways, later, guys. Appreciate you guys. Goodbye, goodbye. Come hang out in the Discord. We can yap more about culinary life and all what it takes to be a line cook, especially calling yourself a chef on your resume and making sure your roommate has a job. Goodbye, guys. Appreciate you guys. Goodbye. Come hang out in the Discord. I'll miss you. Goodbye, goodbye, goodbye. Appreciate you guys. Goodbye. Goodbye, goodbye. Everybody get good sleep, drink enough water. Goodbye. Go to therapy. Goodbye, goodbye, goodbye. Appreciate you guys. Goodbye. Again, goodbye, goodbye, goodbye.